You need to love yourself. You need to accept yourself. You need to give yourself that self-love. Build your self-esteem. You need to just understand that for people to accept you, you have to accept yourself. It's like when you go to a house, you'll be hosted into the house. You'll be invited into the house. If you are not invited into the house, you cannot come in. So, in that context, if you do not love yourself, people cannot love you. The first step towards building your self-esteem is just accepting the fact that there is something about you that is making you insecure, and there is something about you that is making you not to love yourself. Self-love is very big. If you don't love yourself, you will have mental health issues. Why don't I love myself? Why am I feeling inadequate? Maybe yours is a trauma from childhood. Michael Odunshola here again. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Many thanks to our existing subscribers. And if you're new to the family, if you're new to the community, I say a big welcome. If you're yet to subscribe, please hit the subscribe button. I'm reminded of Pastor John Gray, the senior pastor, the associate pastor of Pastor Joel of Lakewood Church, Pastor Joel Austin, reminded of his own traumatic experience, his traumatic childhood. Of course, being born into a dysfunctional home, like many of us. His father, as a child, was jailed. An absent father, a busy mother. One of those times he was alone at the age of 4. Some big teenagers took him out and openly peed on him. They peed on him. He cried and he was deeply hurt. And he wanted to even report those big boys, but they threatened him. They were bullies. They threatened him that if he does report, he would suffer for it. And of course, being a black child in a black community that is filled with violence, the teenage boys, were the big boys. And so they threatened this young 4-year-old kid, the young John Gray at the time. They threatened him, and he kept his mouth mute for another 15 years. He would later open up about that trauma at the age of 19. But in his own story, recounting that ordeal, he said that singular experience traumatized him all his life. That singular experience made him insecure. That singular experience made him say adults are wicked and they don't care. That singular experience will make him hide behind the curtain when opportunities come up for him to participate, because he felt rejected, he felt abused, he felt used. But opening up about it at the age of 19 and confronting it has helped him, to love himself, and he has gone ahead to do great things, even singing as a backup for Kirk Franklin before he would later become an associate pastor of this gigantic, fastest growing church in the US, talking about the Lakewood Church. You see, the idea is there are traumatic experiences you have had in the past. There are hurts, there are wounds that has made you insecure. You see, if you're insecure, honestly, I understand and I can relate. Because if you're in Africa and Nigeria, there is a way people treat you when they perceive you don't have money. And, there is a way they judge you. There is a way they look at you and they feel like you're good riddance to bad rubbish. There is a way people will maltreat you. But guess what? The way people treat you is not as important as the way you treat yourself. So the first step towards loving yourself is just admitting the fact that, okay, what trauma is keeping me from loving myself? Why don't I love myself? Is to admit that, okay, I currently don't love myself. I'm not practicing self-love enough. So practice self-love. Say to yourself, I love myself. First of all, accept the fact that you don't love yourself the way you ought to. Because how do you know you don't love yourself? The way you speak to yourself in private. The choices you make. For instance, when people ask you out and you don't want to go out on a date with them, but you will say yes. When people ask you to do certain things and you don't want to do it, and you say yes. When you are always choosing people over yourself, come on, that's not selflessness. you see, your ability to say no is actually a strength. You see, yes men live a weak life, because the moment you know how to say yes, everybody will place a demand on your time. And your ability to say yes to everybody is actually a show that you have a low self-esteem, that you are not secure in yourself, and so you are looking for all the affirmation and all the validation. Listen. I'm here to tell you this. You're good enough, you're worthy. You are loved by God. The reason why you even have to love yourself is, even the scripture says, love your neighbor as yourself. That is a very powerful concept. If I don't love myself, I can't love you. Interesting. Have you thought about that? If you're a wife and you don't love yourself, you can't love your husband. If you're in a relationship, you don't love yourself, you can't love you can't love the other person. You can't love your partner. So you have to love yourself. So first step, like I said, if you feel like you don't love yourself enough and you want to love yourself, is to admit the fact that there are areas, there are actions, there are things I do that shows that I don't love myself. And this time around, I want to love myself more. So don't live in denial. Be like our friend, Pastor John Gray. He opened up about the trauma at the age of 19. Imagine what he bottled up for 9 years, for 15 years. Another way you can practice self-love and, build your self-esteem is to speak to yourself. The way Oprah Winfrey does it is, she writes a letter to herself. Speak to your younger self. I just imagine my younger self. I'll never forget. As a young kid, in those days in secondary school, I love to sing, and I'll do everything to be part of those that will go and sing on stage. But of course, my vocal capacity, my singing ability is not at an excellent level. And so I'm saying to my younger self now, Michael, you're fine. You don't get to make the team of people that represent your school, but guess what? It's okay, because you don't have anything to do with singing. In the order of your destiny, you are called to speak. Of course, singing, speaking, kind of similar, but not the same. And so you're okay. Oprah Winfrey writes a note to herself. Write a love letter to yourself. You're fine, you're good, you're okay, you are loved. You don't need that external validation. You don't need to have sex with that young man. You don't need to go out with him. You don't need to take off your pants. You don't need to do anything funny for anybody. You are created for peak performance. Go for it.